Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about all the books I finished in February. I think I finished 7. We have a couple different genres. We have Christian fiction, theology, parenting, fiction, a little bit of a diverse group this month. So some are on Kindle Unlimited, some are on Spotify, and some are physical. But I think I finished 7, so we're going to talk about all of them today. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the first book I'm going to be talking about is called Things of the Earth by Joe Rigney. This book I probably need to read it twice. It was quite in-depth. You could tell he was a college professor because he was very kind of, not rambly, but what he was saying could have been said in quite fewer words. However, it was a really good book. The whole point of the book, basically, and this is his quote, was to put to death all false guilt flowing from our existence as creatures. Basically, he addressed being guilty or feeling guilty for living in America and living in a first world country, how we are living very lavishly. Middle class, low class people, we live comfortably compared to other countries in the world, and how I struggle with feeling guilty for living in America. Basically, we're the sin of living in America just because we have so much and we're still so discontent with what we have. And seeing pictures of how others live around the world, it gives, I don't know, I feel very guilty about it. But the same way, I feel guilty about it in the same way that I feel guilty about being a Christian, because why do I have the gift of being saved but not this random person in Walmart? Like, I had nothing to do with my salvation. I also had nothing to do with where I was born. But the book was talking about how God made the earth, and God made all of these bright and beautiful, wonderful things in the world, and he gave the world to us to have dominion over it. And how he was talking about how we like to view certain acts like prayer and reading our Bible and doing devotionals and all those things, we view them as like more holy than taking a walk or taking a nap or doing a hobby. But obviously you need to make time for prayer and Bible reading and all of those things. Those are very important. But he also gave us nature to enjoy. And the monks weren't better Christians because that's literally all they did. We're not worse Christians than hermits in the 1500s. You know, God gave us the world to enjoy it, and obviously that can be abused whenever you're enjoying bad parts of the world, or if you're enjoying in excess and being gluttonous about that. But I think it's important to remember that we're not sinning by not constantly reading our Bible and not 24/7 praying. But the Bible also does talk about how you're supposed to be praying constantly. And so he addressed that. He was talking about, like, whenever he's doing a puzzle with his sons, he can glance over at God and say, "Thank you, Lord, for giving me this gift of 2 healthy boys and this time to spend quality time with them," and yada, yada, yada. So it was really sweet looking at how you can practice gratitude in the little mundane moments every single day. And I don't know, it was really sweet. I really like this book. He talked about how, I'm pretty sure it was, they had problems conceiving their children, and how whenever they finally got pregnant, they felt like naming their children was this huge burden, because they were like, "Lord, this is a gift, and I don't want to waste this." I don't know, I just never thought about like naming a child like that. But he put his poems that he wrote for his 2 sons on how they named them, and those poems were so beautiful. I'm not a poetry person. I don't like poetry, but those were very beautiful poems. So I would recommend reading the book just to read those 2 poems. But that book was on Kindle Unlimited if you have that. But I gave that book 5 stars. I really, really liked it. So moving on to the next one. So I actually forgot I wanted to read this thing I highlighted in Things of the Earth. So this is one of the last pages, and this sums up the book really, really well. But it says, "So if you are awash in a sea of God's gifts, dive in and savor them. Relish all there is to relish in them as a means of expanding your mind and heart to know God more deeply. Receive God's gifts gladly, give thanks for them, and then be as generous with others as God has been with you. And if you are in the midst of losing something or someone precious to you, don't detach. Press in. God is your only comfort, and he is present in your loss in ways you cannot fathom. If you run from the desire and the longing and the pain, all you have is Christ." And I thought that was really, really sweet and a really great way to sum up the book. But yeah, that really stuck with me over the next couple weeks after reading it. But yeah, I do recommend that book a lot. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about that I read is called 14 or Parenting 14 Gospel Principles that something by Paul David Tripp. So I highlighted so much in this book. It was actually crazy. So the main premise of this book, you want to hold a microphone? So the main point of this book was talking about ambassadorship versus ownership with our children, and how we are temporary stewards of them and they don't actually belong to us, even though we're the ones growing them and raising them and sending them off into the world. They're not ours. We're temporary stewards of them. And it's talking about us like white knuckling our kids and trying to teach them to get in line and teach them to obey and do what they're supposed to do and basically make good citizens out of them. Like trying to produce results in our children rather than just being a steward of them and being this moldable servant of God through our kids. So rather, what we should be doing instead of character management is worship alignment or worship realignment for our kids, because everybody is born a sinner and everybody is naturally very selfish. Toddlers are very selfish beings, and we can try to train them up in the way that they should go. Obviously, we should try our best at that, but the end result is in God's hand, and we can read all the parenting books and do all of the right things, and they can still end up so crazy, and you can sit here and wallow in guilt and in self-pity, but that's where God has them right now. And I don't know. You know, sometimes God does weird things. And obviously my only child is only a toddler, so we're not dealing with any serious issues yet. I'm so scared of messing up our kids, like especially boys. I'm so nervous if we ever have a boy. I'm so scared I'm going to screw them up because it feels like there's so many things you can do wrong. So I feel like I'm really going to have to, everybody really has to parent prayerfully and do everything prayerfully. But I really, really like this book. I gave it 5 stars. I really like it. I highlighted so much. I learned so much. I'm going to make my husband read it. It was really, really, really good. Especially like as a anxious tending person, it kind of takes some of the pressure off of me and puts it more on God, because he has ultimate control over her character and her personality and what she does with her life. You know? So it's just kind of comforting. But I really, really liked it. So do recommend that one. I just realized you can like see all the spit out apples behind me. We're in a phase where she doesn't eat. She just chews it up and then spits it out. So ignore that. So the next book I read is called Every Woman is a Theologian. So I don't really know what I was expecting going into this book. Obviously, it's kind of like an apologetics book. And so this is, you already got yours. This is not a like light reading book. I don't know what I was expecting. Oh, you want to hold hands? Okay. So this is definitely not a passive reading book. So to be honest, I did skim most of it. Oops. But I did like it. It was just kind of information overload. And it was a lot of information in a very condensed format. But she did talk about a lot of really good things. And it was a lot of good information and good and true things. I gave it like 3.5 stars-ish. Because it was really nice. It was very thorough and very detailed, but it was so condensed. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, kind of. But she talked about all kinds of things. She talked about Calvinism versus Arminianism and different views of eschatology and kind of like the highlights of just theology in general. She talked about like the Holy Spirit and how we reconcile 3 beings inside of 1 being and all kinds of stuff. I did like it. This was on Kindle Unlimited, but it just wasn't what I was expecting, so my expectations were not met. But I did really like this book, though. And I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, because I skimmed most of it. But it was pretty good. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Shaping of a Christian Family by Elisabeth Elliot. I actually listened to this one on Spotify. I listened to this book on Spotify. I really, really liked it. It was so sweet. It's a very sweet little family-centered book talking about her childhood and how she grew up. She talked about, not directly, but indirectly talked about the importance of mother and fatherhood, like the differences, but also them coming together and how they're both important for childhood. And just their whole family dynamic and getting along with siblings and bringing in new siblings and looking at that. So dough all over my arm. But looking at bringing in new siblings from a child's perspective, just life overall from a child's eyes, and then seeing her grow up and meet her husband, and then him dying, and then, I don't know, it was just really, really sweet seeing how she looked at all of that as an adult, but still seeing it from her childhood eyes. I don't know, I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars. No critiques from me, but she talked a little bit like from her mom's perspective and about how her mom met her dad, and she talked a little bit about from one of her brother's perspectives and how he evangelized. They were very involved in their church, and if the church hosted some kind of missionary or pastor from out of town, it was just guaranteed that that person would be eating dinner at their house that night, and how they were given so many role models and examples of people sharing the gospel, and how it really inspired her and all of her siblings. And obviously that made an impact because she grew up and became a missionary. It was really sweet and very encouraging about, especially her mom, just doing the mundane things, and how her dad would always go off and do these mission things and things for work, and how her mom like always stayed home with the kids, and it was never this burden that her mom made it seem. And her mom was never irritable or jealous or anything like that her dad got to go off and do all these cool things, but like she was content and happy to be at home with her children. And I think that's something that our society, and I specifically, need to be more okay with, is not trying to make everything 50-50, but realizing we do have different roles, and it's beautiful that way, So I don't know, it was really, really sweet. I really, really like that book. So, moving along. Oh, actually, I need my notebook. So this is actually the one I'm most excited to talk about. This was One for the Blackbird, One for the Crow by Olivia Hawker, I think. So after reading a lot of like theology and kind of heavier books, I wanted something a little bit lighter. You want to look at it? What do you see? I wanted something a little bit lighter. This was definitely not light, but I really, really liked it. So it's a fiction book. And so basically it's following these 2 families that live on a prairie, and they can see each other's houses. Oh, you want a microphone? I see. Families that live on a prairie. And I'm not going to spoil anything. All of this happens like right in the very first chapter. But basically an affair happened. The man having the affair got shot by the other husband. And so now you have 2. And then after he shot him, he went and turned himself into jail. So now you have 2 moms, one single, one's a widow, and one's husband is in jail. And so they're learning how to navigate handling all the chores on their farms while having little kids. And you can't have mamas, you have yours. And so it's showing like how they deal with all the chores, how they handle winter without their husbands being there. And it kind of turned into a love story of some of the 2 oldest siblings from each house. And it's really weird because the oldest girl at the mom, it's hard to talk about, but like the mom who cheated with the husband, her oldest daughter is kind of weird. She's not a witch, but she can sense emotions and she can sense spirits around, and she talks to the dead. So I guess she kind of is witchy, but it's not, I don't know. It was kind of weird. I thought that part was odd. And so the mom whose husband is dead, she does not like this girl, and she wants her away from her son because she doesn't want her to be a bad influence on him. I don't know. It was a really, really cool book. But it talked about the process of shearing sheep and the lambs being born. Are you blowing your nose? And there was a lamb that was born that had 2 heads, and it was a whole ordeal. And there was a flood coming, and the youngest daughter almost got swept away in the flood and almost died. And I don't know, it was like a really, really good book. So I actually just started another book by that author this morning, and I already really like that one. So I'll probably talk about that one next month. But that was probably one of my favorite books I've read so far this year. That one was also on Kindle Unlimited. So highly recommend that one. I think I gave that one 5 stars. It was perfect for me. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the next book because I still have a bunch to fold. This one is called The Tech Wise Family. It reminds me a lot of the book Habits of the Household, which I think is a pretty popular book. I really need to reread that one, but they're very similar, talking about like the purpose of technology, how to use it not efficiently, but use it sparingly. And he gave like 10 principles of how to use technology, and it was like, we're going to use it together for a purpose rather than separately, just mind numbing, you know? And that's something that was really important for me. Like with the baby, I don't really do a whole lot of screen time. We went through phases where we were watching something like every day, and now I'm starting to wean off. I've become very conscious of my screen time, and my phone usage is something I feel very strongly about. I do not like the baby seeing me on my phone, which is my biggest hang up with like doing TikTok and with doing YouTube. You obviously have to spend time on your phone recording. Even if I edit while she's asleep, she's still seeing me pull up my phone 14 times a day to get these clips. So I feel very conflicted about it. But anyways, this was a really good book. He talked a lot about the Sabbath and how they turn off their phones every Sunday, once a week, and then, once a week they turn it off for a day, once a year they turn it off for a week or something like that. And so they really prioritize no screen time on the Sabbath. It was also really interesting. One of the last chapters, he talked about singing together. Like obviously we sing together in church, and you sing at baseball games, and it provides this really great sense of unity and togetherness and how you should like sing as a family. And I don't know, it just seems kind of awkward to me because it's not something I grew up doing. Like I sing to her all the time, but the thought of like just singing together, like singing the doxology, like I know a couple families who sing the doxology every night at dinner time, and that seems really sweet and special, but it just feels so awkward to me. But it's really a good idea though to provide this oneness, and like, I don't know, I think singing together is really special, and that might be something we start incorporating a little bit. I don't know, we'll see. This was a pretty short book. I read it like in 2 sittings or in 2 nap times, so I really did like it. Okay, so this next book I read is by Francine Rivers. It is The Lady's Mine, which is kind of a play on words because it's like a love story, and it's also about a mining town, so it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of funny, but I really like this book. I really like the pacing of it. It was slow, but I liked it because you could see like every single day the progress that was happening. So basically this lady inherited her uncle's mine, and she goes across the country. It's just like in the 1800s. Hold on, baby. It's in the 1800s. She inherits her uncle. You want me to hold you? But she inherits her uncle's mine. She goes across the country to figure out like what's happening with it. And it's a small little mining town of like only men. What do you see? And she's trying to figure out how she can reform the town and make it better. And she ends up falling in love with one of the leading townsmen. Like the only thing I did not like about this book is the romance. It just felt kind of fake. The romance felt a little bit faked, and I feel like I would have liked it so much better if it just didn't have any of the romance. But it's Francine Rivers, and that's what she writes. So, but in that aspect, it was like icky to me. But the actual story of like reforming the town and all the mining stuff and all the politics, I really liked that part. So this is probably one of my favorite books I've read of hers. I don't really read Francine Rivers anymore. I feel kind of convicted about it because they're still kind of smutty. They're just Christian smut, you know, and I feel kind of weird about reading them. But this one wasn't near as bad as some of her other ones, but I really did enjoy it. So I just really like the historical aspect of the whole book. But moving on to the next one. Okay, it's like first thing in the morning. The baby's not even awake yet, but I wanted to make sure I could get this done today so that I could post it tomorrow. But I forgot to talk about one of the books I read, which was Habits for a Sacred Home by Jennifer Pepito, I think it was. So I really did like this book. It was very encouraging and there was a lot of good truth in it. However, it felt a little bit shallow to me. Well, first, I wrote down all the chapters. So it was about work, stewardship, prayer, order, simplicity, stability, hospitality, and community. And each chapter, she's basically talking about a different missionary at some point in time. The one that I'm talking about that feels shallow, especially, is she's talking about Christians in Romania whenever communism was rampant and Christians were being persecuted, and I forget who it was, but this missionary had the opportunity to flee the country and they decided to stay to be a witness for the gospel in such a dark place. And so basically they gave away everything they had. They lived off of nothing because Christians weren't even allowed to have ration cards. So they had nothing to live off of, basically. But the author took that and she kind of equivalized it to modern America being a minimalist and not having a lot of things in it. I don't know, it just felt kind of like it was taking away from the true sacrifice that was and being like, it just felt a little weird to me. It still was really good. I would read it again and I would recommend it. But yeah, so those were all of the 7. I think it was 7. So there are 9. So those are the 9 books I read in February. It was a really good reading month. I'm very surprised I actually read that much because February is a short month. But I really enjoyed all those books. I kind of sped through them. But thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.